Hi, welcome back to what is the second in a series of videos on Wi-Fi in schools and the health risks to children, teachers, and administrators from RF microwave radiation. In the first video, we tested a school in Vermont, the Calais School, and found that radiation levels were up to 3 times higher in a typical Wi-Fi enabled classroom than they were near a cell tower. Although this information was eye-opening and deeply upsetting, it left many questions unanswered. This and other videos will delve more deeply into those questions and give you the best information possible so that the true health risks can be investigated. This information can elicit strong emotions, both with concern or outright fear of these adverse effects, or it can also lead to anger and actually quite resistant behavior for others. What we need to do is to go beyond that. We need to base our decisions on science and not whether or not we like the message. Remember, these children do not have a say in this topic, and we need to do the best job we can to look into this for them. So let's do that. I understand that this video is almost half an hour long, and that this is most likely a lot more time than you have for this right now. Although I hope you can watch it at your convenience in its entirety. Here's the bottom line. On the left side of this chart are cell tower studies with the accompanying adverse biological effects, such as significantly increased cancer rates. On the right side are the classroom readings. Pause this video and compare the readings from the studies to the readings at the school, and I think you'll see why this is so concerning. At times throughout this video, there will be some fairly technical information, so feel free to pause it just by clicking on the screen and take a look at it closely. Also, links to these studies will be provided under the video, and you can access these by clicking Show More. Lastly, under the video and to the right is a setting for picture quality. It may say 360p or 480p. Click this number and select 720p or 1080p. This will give improved picture quality. You may have to restart the video. Now let's get on with this presentation. If you hadn't had a chance to see these yet, I'd like to introduce you to the scientific papers that are the foundation for these health concerns related to Wi-Fi and other wireless devices. The best site I've found is powerwatch.org.uk, as it provides a comprehensive and well-organized list. Studies on this site are labeled with a P if effects were found, an N if effects were not found, and a dash if the study offered other insights or findings. This first section on mobile and cordless phones has an enormous list of studies. Notice how many of them have P's next to them. Here's the section on Wi-Fi. Notice how few studies there are. Very little research has been done on this, despite how far and wide this technology has spread in such a short period of time. Wi-Fi's been around for what, 10 years now? Certainly there haven't been any long-term studies on children for us to look at. If we don't have any studies on Wi-Fi, then what can we do now? Well, Wi-Fi emits very similar frequencies to cellular technology, and both are considered RF or radio frequency microwave radiation. As a review, here's the electromagnetic spectrum. On the far left are the lowest frequencies, and on the far right are the highest. Right in the middle of the chart are microwaves. So if we take Wi-Fi and put that on the chart, this is where it fits on the spectrum. And then if we take the cell phone frequencies and put them on, this is where they go. So they actually overlap each other. In reality, both cell phones and Wi-Fi are microwave transmitters. To make this perfectly clear, microwave ovens. Do you know what frequency they use? 2.45 gigahertz, the same as Wi-Fi. We're filling our homes, our schools, and now our towns with the same frequency as a microwave oven. So yes, Wi-Fi is microwave radiation. So although we don't have many studies to look at for Wi-Fi, we do have a lot of research on cell phones and cell phone towers that we can look to for an idea of the risks that we're facing. Given that we compared the classroom test readings to a cell tower, let's start with a comparison to cell tower studies. So here on the PowerWatch site, we can just click on phone masts and it'll take us straight to the cell phone tower studies. As you can see from scrolling through here, some of the studies have found effects, some of the studies have not found effects, and then there's others that just offered findings but didn't report effects one way or the other. I went ahead and did a tally of all the studies that were in the cell tower section, and as you can see, many studies did find effects and only a small percentage did not. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of those studies that did find effects. As you can probably imagine, this information is going to be disturbing. And so, although I think that it's extremely important to know about so that we can understand the risk that we're facing, you might want to pick the right time to view this material. Before we do this, though, there's one more step. These cell tower studies use a different unit of measurement than what we've been doing so far. We've used millivolts per meter, but these studies use microwatts per square meter. It's just their preferred measurement. So we need to convert. Here's the formula at the top. First, we convert from millivolts per meter to volts per meter, and then from volts per meter to microwatts per square meter. You can see the converted numbers on the right. Here then we have the numbers rounded off and in microwatts per square meter. Classroom readings were 1700. The readings near the laptops were 21,000, and the cell tower is around 1800. Now, in case you're wondering if I did my math correctly, which I myself was concerned about, here's a site that has a conversion function built in. So we can take the numbers in volts per meter and it will give us the answer in microwatts per square meter. So let's start with the classroom background, which was 800 millivolts per meter. We have to convert to volts per meter. That's it comes to 0.8. So 0.8 volts per meter, convert 1700 roughly. All right, now we're going to go and we're going to do the readings that were taken right near the laptops, which were 2857 millivolts. That is 2.857. So that's 2.857 volts per meter. Convert, it comes to 21,651 microwatts per square meter. Also, we now have additional confirmation of this information from another source. After the release of the first video, a neighboring school, the Rumney Elementary School, was made aware of this health issue by concerned parents, and the school immediately began an investigation. In doing so, they bought their own meter and took their own readings. I just heard back from their director of technology, and the readings are comparable to the readings from the Callis School. So at this point, we can say with certainty that these numbers are generally the same, and then move on to looking at the science, so that we can at some point start to put together an idea of what the risks are before us. Also, as additional confirmation, I found this paper, Assessment of Exposure to Electromagnetic Fields from Wireless Computer Networks, Wi-Fi, in Schools, results of laboratory measurements. This was a very in-depth study done by the Health Protection Agency over in the UK. And as you can see here, they created charts of the power density levels and how it drops off with distance. These were very similar to what we found at the Calais School. Okay, so the first study that I'd like to show you is this one. This was a study that was done in Germany in 2004, in which they were looking to find out if there was a greater risk of malignant tumors for people who were living close to the cell towers. This was a fairly large study. There were almost 1,000 patients. The range from the cell tower was up to 400 meters. And in short, what they found was that after the cell tower had been in operation for 5 years, the residents in that area who were closest to the tower had triple the cancer risk compared to those who were outside the area. Down here is a list of the different types of cancers that were found. The most prevalent was breast cancer, pancreas cancer was another one, lung cancer, and other types of cancers as well. It mentions over here that there was a large enough population studied in this research project that it was unlikely that there was some sort of statistical aberration or other disruptive influence. For the women who came down with breast cancer, actually it might not just be women. For the individuals who came down with breast cancer in this project, they found that the people who came down with it inside the area closest to the tower developed it 20 years younger than those who would have been further away from the tower. Down here it mentions that it's very likely that it was the high frequency electromagnetic fields that were a factor, and that it's important that we let go of this assumption that there is no causal link between RF frequency, which means microwave radiation, and increased cancer rates. Okay, so let's take a look at another study. This is another cancer study that was done in Austria. It was published in 2008. There were 2,500 or so participants. There were 3 areas. There was an area closer to the tower, sort of a middle area, and then a further area. All 3 of these areas had a significantly increased cancer risk. And the incidence was particularly pronounced for breast and brain tumors. This study specifies the power density levels. So you have in the outer area 10 to 100 microwatts per meter squared. The middle one was 100 to 1,000, and then the area closest to the tower was greater than 1,000. These were all compared to somewhere further away that had levels less than 10. Now again, for all of these 3 areas, there was a significantly increased risk ratio. The area closest to the tower, which is over 1,000, had 5 to 8 times higher risk. And the cancer cases were most pronounced for breast and brain tumors. So, again, the classroom was just less than 1,000, but the area right next to the laptops was 21,000. So the risk should be quite a bit higher. This is a chart for all cancers, 10 to 100. The increased risk was not so significant, I guess. But once you got over 100 to up to 1,000, the risk really started to go up. And then over 1,000, the risk was over 8 times the risk of all cancers. For breast cancers, it was considerably higher. For over 1,000, you're talking almost 23 times the breast cancer risk. Brain cancers, though, are unbelievable. You have 4 out of the 10 to 1,000, you have 20 times the risk. And then in the area closest to the tower, which is greater than 1,000, you have over 120 times the risk of brain cancer. Remember, this is the same general power density level as what the students are experiencing in the classroom in a Wi-Fi environment, but it's 1/20th of the power density levels that the children are exposed to while they're sitting at their laptops. This is what one of the towers look like, and then you can see, I mean, they had this tower right near a residential neighborhood surrounded by houses. Okay, let's take a look at another study. This one was done in Israel in 2004. It had over 1,000 participants. This one's the Netanya area. In short, they found that for those who were living closer to the tower compared to those who were living further away from the tower, there was a four times greater risk of developing cancer. However, for females, the risk was over 10 times. The power density levels for the area that was close to the tower was beneath 0.53 microwatts per centimeter squared. So we're going to need to convert that. But they do go on to say that this is far below the current guidelines, which are based on the thermal effects of RF exposure, which means a lot of the international guidelines say that as long as the RF power density levels are below those that would create heating effect to tissue, as long as they're beneath those, everything's fine. But this study goes on to say that they were way beneath that, and they were having dramatic increases in cancer incidence. If we take 0.53 microwatts per square centimeter and convert it, we get 5,300 microwatts per square meter, and this is more than the classroom readings, but about a quarter of the readings that would be taken where the children would be sitting at the laptops. So, let's take a look here. The thing that's most concerning about what they found here is that there was an enormous short latency period, less than 2 years. So this increased risk of cancer happened quickly. They found that women were most at risk, and that 7 out of 8 of the cancer cases were women, and this was very similar to a study that had been done earlier that found that 6 out of 7 leukemia cases in proximity to radio towers happened to girls. So it appears that females are more susceptible to RF radiation. Okay, next one. This one is not a cancer study. This one studies subjective symptoms such as sleeping problems and cognitive performance in subjects living near mobile phone base stations or cell towers. It was published in 2005-2006. It studied 10 different cell towers, had 365 patients. The distance from the antenna was up to 600 meters. The study took place in Austria. Must be mentioned that Austria is one of the leading countries that's been looking at this type of study, and as a result of this, they've greatly reduced their acceptable exposure limits. There are 3 different categories, exposure categories, but as you can notice, this is yet another unit of measurement, so we're going to have to convert again. So let's take a minute and do that. So this is what happens when we convert from milliwatts per square meter to microwatts per square meter. Okay, so back to this study. There's a chart down here I'd like to show you. This is a list of all the different symptoms, and with each of these symptoms there are 3 different exposure categories. Now let's just go with the highest one because it's still half that of the classroom, a Wi-Fi enabled classroom, and it's 40 times less than the exposure that a student would get at a Wi-Fi enabled laptop. So of the symptoms, headaches, there was a higher risk of headaches. Let's see, cold hands, feet, loss of appetite, exhaustion, tiredness, difficulty concentrating. So needless to say, these would be concerns if you wanted these students to have the best learning environment possible. And I think these are definitely things that we should be concerned about. Okay, so let's do a review. The first study, which was done by Egger, came from Germany. They found that those who were living near the tower fell ill on average 8 years earlier, and that after 5 years of exposure, they had 3 times the risk of cancer. Those who came down with breast cancer got it 20 years younger than those who were further away from the tower. The second study, Oberfeld, which was from Austria, found that there was a significantly increased cancer risk for all of the areas near the tower, and that the highest radiation levels, which were greater than 1,000 microwatts per square meter, which again is the same as the classroom, just about, but 20 times less than the areas near the laptops. This radiation level gave an overall increased risk of 5 to 8 times for cancer. And this same radiation level gave 23 times the risks of breast cancer and 120 times the risks of brain cancer. And then here, in part 2, we have the Wolf study, which came from Israel. This power density level, which was 5,300 microwatts per square meter, which is higher than the classroom, but less than the laptops in terms of radiation levels, gave 4 times the risk of cancer overall and 10 times the risk of cancer for females. And then last, we have a study from Hutter. This was again from Austria. 500 microwatts per square meter, which is half that of the classroom, created subjective issues such as an increased risk of headaches, loss of appetite, exhaustion, and difficulty concentrating. Now, when we compare the cell tower radiation levels that were in the studies to the readings that we took in the classroom, and particularly near the laptops, the risks really stand out. Egger, the power density levels were undefined, so we can leave that out. Oberfeld had the highest risk level was greater than 1,000 microwatts per square meter. Well, if you look over at the classroom, that was 1,700. So this is 60% of a Wi-Fi classroom and 5% of the radiation near the laptops. So you're talking 5 to 8 times the risk of cancer, 23 times the risk of breast cancer, and 120 times the risk of brain cancer. But the radiation is that much less than a classroom where the kids are going to be spending every day. Going on to Wolf, they had 5,300 microwatts per square meter, so that was more than the classroom, but it still was only 25% of the radiation near the laptops. So 4 times the risk of cancer overall and 10 times the risk of cancer for females, but it's less than what these girls would be exposed to as part of their schooling for years on end. And then last with Hutter, they had 500 microwatts per meter squared, per square meter. So that was only half of the classroom levels and 2% of the radiation near laptops. But it was enough to cause increased risk of headaches, loss of appetite, exhaustion, and difficulty concentrating. I mean, if this is linear at all, and if these risks increase with radiation levels, which I think they would, there's clearly a significant risk here. If you're thinking that these studies were cherry-picked, they were not. Remember, according to this tally, many studies found adverse biological effects. And although we haven't looked at all of them, these samples that we looked at were consistent in that they show extremely serious health issues. In fact, we have new information now that shows that this may be even more serious than these numbers indicate. This paper, Exposure Limits the Underestimation of Absorbed Cell Phone Radiation, especially in children, which was just released in October 2011, indicates that these children are much more at risk. Remember, children are more vulnerable than adults because their skulls are thinner, their cells are still rapidly dividing, they have a higher water content, which means they're more conductive, and their immune systems are still yet undeveloped. So these numbers, as if they weren't bad enough, might be a lot worse for children. These cell tower studies are only a small portion of the field of research that addresses electromagnetic radiation and the adverse biological effects. There is a lot more where this came from, and we'll look at this in future videos, including a full comparison of Wi-Fi to cell phones, a source of radiation that's becoming more clear is a health risk that we should be protecting our children from. As I said in the first video, let your school know. They have both a moral and legal responsibility to providing a safe learning environment. I suggest you write them a letter and send it certified mail. Thank you.